Hello, Year 10. I hope you had a nice half term. It was beautiful weather, wasn't it? You probably couldn't see as much of your friends as you'd like, or not in real life anyway, but I hope you got out and enjoyed some of the glorious weather that we had over half term. Now, for the next 4 weeks, we're looking at speech writing and delivering speeches. But before we get on to the nuts and bolts of that, and I'll tell you all about it, I just want you to jot down a couple of lists here. What do you think makes a confident speaker? So is it the way they stand, lots of eye contact with the audience, that sort of thing? And what strategies do they use? Obviously, they're going to use things like persuade, or sorry, not persuade, we don't do that anymore, daft forest, and so on. So just make a little list of the things that you think make a confident speaker and what strategies they might use. And I'll give you 5 minutes to do that and go on to the next slide. Right, our learning objective today, which as usual doesn't go into the books, is to explore ways of writing and delivering, by that I mean speaking, effective speeches. So into your books write a new title, Effective Speech Writing and Speaking. Now, as in the do now, we need to think about what makes a great speech. Now that poor chap there standing at the front of the class is not going to be delivering a very effective speech, is he? One of the things about watching people speak in public, or really do anything in public, is if they look uncomfortable, it transmits to the audience and then the whole room is uncomfortable, which is not an ideal atmosphere to create. So we're going to go over some of the ways, we're going to begin to go over some of the ways that we can challenge that today. When you get back to school, that's in the after the summer holiday, you'll be undertaking your speaking and listening assessment. This is a requirement of the OTR exam board, but it will be marked separately from your GCSE. You'll get either a non-classified, a pass, or a merit or a distinction, and it does not affect either your English language or literature grade. Now, the thing about this is, Year 10, it is really not a thing to worry about. People get very worked up and nervous about making speeches. The way this is going to work is you're going to pick a subject. We're going to pretty much together, we're going to all write the speeches. We're going to do, and then ultimately for the assessment, you have to stand in front of the class, and there's only 14 of us, and we all know each other, so it's not a problem. It's just us, and you have to deliver your speech. You can't simply read it out. You can. Some people do it from memory, although I don't advise that. Putting it onto cue cards is better, flashcards, and then you have to take about 4 minutes of questions from your colleagues on the floor, and if they run out of questions, I'll ask you some. But it's a very, we create a very friendly, supportive atmosphere. No one's judging anybody. Everybody's got to do it, and frankly, it's easy. And it is easy. It's frustrating how children make such a big deal out of this, and they shouldn't, because in the posher schools, the private schools, for example, one of the things that they can relentlessly do is speak in public, and it really helps them when they leave school. They're no more intelligent than anybody else. They just have the confidence to stand up and speak. And I'd like to go some way down the road to giving you guys that confidence. So trust me on this, and it'll all be good. And here's the assessment criteria, which is what we use before we get to the mark scheme, to see how you've done. You need to be audible. We've got to be able to hear you, obviously. You've got to use spoken standard English, and don't worry, Gloria, it's fine. Your English is well up to this. It must be intelligible. It means we've got to be able to understand it, and generally use language appropriate to the formal setting of the presentation, i.e. you're not using slang or abbreviation or any of those things. You're not in a playground talking to your mates. It's a formal environment where you're making a speech. Here's the actual mark scheme. I won't go through the whole thing, but that, if you do, have a look at that, and it'll give you an idea what it is you need to do to pass. And here we are. Look, the spoken language assessment requires learners to create a spoken presentation followed by questions from the audience, and the audience is just us. We're not doing this in the hall or anything. It's just us in the classroom. As a guide, the duration of the whole assessment should be no more than 10 minutes. Which can be divided into 45 minutes presentation and 45 minutes questions and feedback from the audience. And quite often students do a lot better in the feedback part of it. Learners can choose any topic to speak on. Whatever, if you've got hobbies or films. I've had people talking about coconut water, I've had people talking about philosophy. I've had people talking about motorbikes, horses, cats. Football's always a good one, obviously. Anything you like, anything, and pick something that you're confident about speaking about. The thing is that we're going to be practicing this for the next 4 weeks, but the subject that you pick now doesn't have to be the one that you use next year. So don't overthink the picking of the subject. So, don't go picking astronomy or something, just because it sounded cool to pick it. It's something that you've got to be able to talk about confidently. Now, I want you to look at this link, click on it, and have a look at it. This is the model, Cameron Russell, doing a TED talk. So have a look at that. And then afterwards, just jot down some answers to these questions. Was it interesting? Did it hold your interest? Did she keep you interested as she went through the speech? And if she did, how did she do that? Did you learn anything? Did it change or develop your views and opinions? These are all the things that we're looking for in a speech. Did you think the speaker had personal involvement in the experience or knowledge of the subject? Was it sort of anecdotal? Was it something that she'd gone through? And given that it's a talk about modelling, yes. So have a look at the thing on at the speech on YouTube there, and then write down some answers to those questions. Now here are most of the techniques. I think pretty much all of the ones that that she used. Rhetorical, a lot of these are going to come under the Daft Forest heading, but we're going to be giving these speeches, so there are other things we need to think about. Rhetorical questions, direct address to engage the audience, using anecdotes or stories to prove a point, humour, she's quite funny, emphasis on individual words or phrases, frequent change of tone, when you're making a speech. Don't drone on like perhaps I do on these presentations. Move your tone up and down, and it makes it more interesting. Obviously, don't do it randomly. You have to do it where it's going to have an impact. She had lots of eye contact and positive body language, lots of gestures, which is much the same thing. And the pace was good. She wasn't rattling through it because she was desperately nervous. Although I would argue that she was actually quite nervous. But more power to her for overcoming that and managing to keep the pace sensible. And you've got to make sure that the audience relates to what you're talking about. So copy those into your books. That'll take you 10 minutes. Now I want you to spend 15 minutes deciding on a subject for a speech. As I say, it doesn't have to be the one you have to do for the formal assessment when we get back next year in September, next academic year that is. But it could be, and if it is that one, then probably if you can decide on one now that you would go with then do. So take a bit of time, take 15 minutes, and use these bullet points underneath here to help you decide if your subject is going to be robust enough to do this with. Is your subject interesting and enjoyable? Is it able to hold your audience's interest throughout? You're going to be in front of them for sort of 8 or 10 minutes. So will it hold their attention? Will it teach your audience anything? Will it challenge your audience's views and opinions? Will it communicate your personal involvement in experience of knowledge of the subject? Now, some people say they haven't got hobbies, they don't do anything, but everybody's alive, everyone does something. You could make a speech on the subject of the lockdown. I expect we'll get a few of those this year. Things that you did in the lockdown, even if it's just films that you watched in the lockdown, new films that maybe changed your view on things, or anything what's key is that you feel comfortable talking about it. And one of the reasons I love this module is you quite often get to see a side of students that you don't otherwise see. I've found out that students are champion horse riders, for example, or on a more modest level, that they like gardening, all things that I didn't otherwise know about them, and it's lovely to hear about them. So you've got 15 minutes there. Write those criteria into your books as well, those bullet points, and make sure that the subject that you choose, you ticks all of those. Just have a look at this. You don't need to write anything down, but half of the assessment, as I've already said, is your ability to respond to your audience's questions. They won't be asking questions to catch you out, and they won't be asking questions testing your knowledge of the subject. We do lessons on how it is that you ask the questions as well. You ask questions that invite the person who's speaking to speak more. So they won't be grilling you on anything, and I shall be obviously in the room directing everything. So if anyone asks a question that I don't think is appropriate, or is, you know, not of the right type accidentally, then I'll you know, we'll sort it out. So you don't need to worry. You don't need to be an expert on your subject, but you need to be confident about it. So just have a think what questions your audience might want to ask you about your subject. And that's it for today. I'd like everyone to send me their choice of subject. So when you send me your work, which most of you are doing now, I'd like to see what it is you're going to be using for the focus for these 4 weeks. As I say, it doesn't have to be the one that you use next year, but if it is, that would be good. I would argue that we should all really try and pick one now. So there you are, Year 10. I look forward to seeing your work, and I will speak to you tomorrow. Thank you.